Well, British Grand Prix, Silverstone 2024. Um, Not the most exciting race, to be fair, till the end, where it got very exciting. But certainly an interesting race. Um, Not necessarily a rum race like some of the others. However, I am having some rum because I'm actually celebrating getting back power late this evening for the first time after 5 days now, essentially. After Hurricane Beryl of not having power, finally got back some power. This very late this evening, down in the night. So that's worth a rum. Um, Even without the power, still managed to watch the race. Um, and let's start with a big congratulations to Lewis Hamilton. No question about it. Drove superbly. He did not put a foot wrong. In fact, I would, and this is in no way, shape, or form to diminish his win, but there's a trend I see here of, and I mentioned it a number of times in the previous, with Russell winning, even when Max won a couple of races back. I've seen where the McLarens are the fastest car, but they are losing the race, not the eventual winners winning the race, whether it's Russell, Verstappen, or in this case Hamilton. McLaren are really throwing this season away. Lando is throwing and having his championship thrown away this season. And I'm comfortable in saying that. As much as Hamilton won the race on good pace, the truth is Norris was faster. And when Norris was catching Verstappen, in where was it? Spain, Russell as well. Each time it seems like a recurring theme that McLaren has the race and throw it away, and whoever else is there to pick up the pieces benefits from it. In this time around, it was Hamilton. And why I say full credit to him is because, just like with Russell, when Norris and Verstappen came together in Austria, you have to be there to pick up the pieces. And if you're not there, then you won't benefit. So full credit to Hamilton. Let's look at, as you can see, I'm trying to change this format. I realized I had a look at some of the feeds. I don't really actually watch back the videos on YouTube, which I probably should. I don't. And I realized I'm going to try this horizontal format instead of the vertical one. You can give me a little feedback if you think it's an improvement or not. I'm not really sure. But let me try it and see. Let's look at Hamilton. Let's look at the winners, the race. Hamilton, I think, was maybe a little bit lucky in a number of aspects. I think he was a bit lucky that Russell had an engine issue. I think they said he had a cooling issue. Then when the rain came, I think Norris and Piastri, in fact, both McLarens, I think they may have leaned heavily towards a rain setting after qualifying, because on the wet, in the inters, they were very fast. They just blew past everybody. So that suggests to me that their rain setting was very, very good on their chassis. Now, having said that, they were fast in the dry too. I mean, both Norris and Piastri just blew by Verstappen as if he wasn't even there. So I think as we've seen again with a trend, McLaren is definitely now established as the fastest car. I think they've definitely passed Red Bull in terms of just outright pace. McLaren is the fastest car, but they are being shockingly, in my opinion, let down by their strategy, and to a lesser extent by their drivers. But it's really strategy led, because some of the mistakes being made by the drivers, in my opinion, are influenced by the strategy being put forward by the team. So Hamilton, good win. Russell, unlucky. Mercedes looking super strong. I mean, I cannot stress enough how well Mercedes has turned their season around. You know, it really mirrors what happened to McLaren last year, where they basically came from zero and turned their season around and now are challenging, or now are actually the best. You see, Mercedes seem to be on that trajectory. Whether they'll actually reach to where they can be the fastest, we'll see. Or will other teams pick up the pace as well. But certainly, McLaren is the fastest, and Mercedes is emerging as a very, very strong second or third team. Ferrari going backward. Again, you know, I'm hesitant about. You often hear me talk about trends and trajectory, and not to judge Formula One in snapshots, because trajectories are important. I mentioned Haas the other day as on an upward trajectory. We see it happening here as well in this race, but we'll get to that shortly. I don't want to skip around too much. But the trajectory for Ferrari is not good. That's a fact. When you compare McLaren's trajectory, Mercedes' trajectory, and even Red Bull to a lesser extent, when you compare those three to Ferrari as the top four teams, Ferrari is nowhere. I mean, they just cannot seem to get it right. In fact, in this race, the Sainz ran the previous generation set of upgrades, as in Sainz ran the spec that was run at Imola, I think. Was it Imola or could be Spain? I don't remember, but he ran a previous setup. Charles is running the latest setup with the updates, and it's clearly going backward. It's not working for him. And Sainz was much faster. I think Sainz is like 9 or 10 kilometers faster in sections than Leclerc, which means that it's obvious that the previous setup was superior. We see this happen occasionally with lower grade teams like Aston Martin and V-Carb and so, where they bring upgrades and they either don't work or they even go backward. I don't expect that from a team like Ferrari at their level, yet here we are. Now, I don't want to kick them when they're down and kind of harp too much on the past, because I do think Vasseur has brought a positive influence and is trying to move the team forward. But at the same time, we can't ignore history. And Vasseur is just one man. Yes, he's the head, and he can certainly influence things. But ultimately, culture takes time to change. And you can't help but feel that Ferrari is just, they're just, I used the expression in the last video, which is snatching victory from the jaws of defeat. Or rather, the other way, sorry, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. You just feel that Ferrari is not getting it right. And I made a joke about it recently, but now it's maybe not so funny. When Hamilton looks at what Mercedes is doing now and what Ferrari is doing now, it's kind of one of those things that make you go, moment. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what Ferrari is doing. McLaren. I don't even know where to start. I probably will speak about McLaren more than Red Bull and Mercedes, despite Mercedes and Red Bull coming first and second. McLaren is a conundrum. They've built an excellent car. It is so well rounded and balanced in its performance. It has excellent low speed characteristics. It handles, medium speed corners well, and it absolutely flies in high speed corners. Combine that with the ability to be very kind to its tires. Again, we're nearer to the end of the stint. It seems to be faster. That has been a trend for a while. Not necessarily in this particular race, but certainly in general. You just can't help but think that they've hit a home run with this car, and it's really working and it is a championship winning car. Not a contender, it's a winning car, as in it is literally, this car is capable of winning championships. The drivers are also fast. I mean, today in the wet, that was magic. I mean, Norris and Piastri, it's like they were on a dry track, whereas everybody else was on a wet track. That's the difference. I mean, they just rolled over the front runners, right, as if they didn't exist. That's no joke, right? And it's not like Hamilton and Verstappen can't drive in the wet. They can. They're superb in the wet. And yet Norris and Piastri just literally blew them away. So I have to say that it is clear that McLaren has the best car, and they have an excellent set of drivers. In fact, I'd probably argue that McLaren's driver pairing right now is probably the strongest. I mean, Hamilton and Russell are a strong pair, but I would probably give the edge to Lando and Piastri. They really are a very strong pair. So what's going wrong for them? What is going wrong? Why is it that race after race after race, they are losing the race and others are inheriting the win? What is it that they're doing wrong? And you have to now start to look at the team, right? Now, I don't want it to sound like I'm just gonna bash Brown and Stella, because everybody have strengths and weaknesses, right? And to consider where the team was to where it is now, they must be doing some things right. But at the same time, you can't help but think that they're doing some serious things wrong too. And their strategy sucks. I mean, it is atrocious. Let's look at today, right? They basically royally screwed it in three fundamental points. First of all, the double stack, or what they should have done was double stack Norris and Piastri. Now, I alluded to this the other day, and I'll mention it again because it's worth saying it, to stress it, to emphasize it. Teams run simulations non-stop. They literally run them in the hundreds, sometimes in the thousands. They go through all the permutations. And a meet like this with the rain, they have every different eventuality covered in terms of what their simulations tell them. How can you leave out Piastri? How can you trade them the disadvantage of a maybe 2.5 to 3 second maximum delay if you did a double stack versus a 15, 18, maybe as much as a 20-second loss, keeping him out extra on that extra lap on the wet, in the wet, on slicks? That makes absolutely no sense. That is literally insanity, right? Now, and you don't need to be an F1 strategist. You don't need to have a computer simulation to know that a double stack costs you 2 or 3 seconds for the second car, and a wet lap on slicks is gonna cost you. Remember, Silverstone is long and it's a very fast track. Silverstone is a 1 minute 30 something lap, so it's a long lap and it's a very, very high speed lap. So in other words, when you're losing grip on slicks in the wet, you're losing a massive chunk of time. The time it takes you to do that lap and come back around. I think you almost did like something like a ridiculous, like a 2 minute lap almost to get back around. You're talking, that is insanity. How are they balancing that out against losing 2, 3, maybe 4, let's even say worst case scenario, 4 or 5 seconds in the double stack versus that kind of time loss? That is crazy. That is an incomprehensibly bad call, right? Secondly, when Norris is to come in on the last lap from the Inters now to switch to back to slicks, why wait that extra lap? He's fighting with Hamilton. They're close. Why make him lose the extra 2 or 2.5 seconds? That makes no sense. Literally, that made no sense. You automatically cause him to lose his place when he's re-entering the race from the pit because Hamilton has passed him in the pits, because you've wasted that time for the extra lap. That's illogical. Again, you don't need to be a F1 strategist to figure that out. Just the casual F1 fan who understands anything about race strategy will figure that out quickly. That they left Norris out for extra lap and there's no apparent reason, right? Finally, again going back to the simulations with the tire selection, why would they pick the softs? You don't necessarily have to go to the extreme of Red Bull with the hards. That might have been seen as a bit of a roll of the dice. But at least use mediums. You had a brand new set of mediums. In fact, if you listen to even the commentators talking, they themselves just could not understand why. I was watching the F1 TV feed, and they kept stressing, before the pit stop, they said, well, McLaren, they prepared for this eventuality. They had a brand new set of mediums put on. They put on softs. Why? Why do that? Makes no sense and cost him the race. No question about it. When you combine, they could have had Norris as the winner, and they could have had Piastri on the podium, whether in second or third. If they had done the double stack, if they had brought Norris in on the lap, he should have come in, and if he had put him on the mediums. There's no question about it that he would have won the race and Piastri would have finished either second or third. So the team is throwing these results away. When you come on the radio and you're giving the driver options, first of all, you give driver options when you're talking about choosing whether to switch from wet to dry or whatever. Yes, you'll have some data about the crossover point, that's ideal, but driver feel has a lot to do with that when it comes to, should I go to wet, should I go to dry, into whatever. That I can appreciate. But when you're talking about deciding on dry compounds, whereas you can give the driver an option, I don't necessarily think that's wise, because you have the data that should have guided whatever decision you're going to make about tires. And you should always go with the data, right? The driver feel is not as critical when it comes to that part of it. When it comes to a dry selection of compound, use the data. That's number one. Number two, even if you're going to give the driver a choice, it should come with a recommendation. You don't say, hey, you want softs to fight Max, or you want hards to medium to fight Lewis. What kind of crap is that? You don't give the driver the amount of stuff he has to be processing. That's a nonsense. You give him, what you do is you give him the ideal choice. You say, listen, we think that the medium is the fastest option. However, the softs are available should you choose, but when we run the simulations, the mediums are the best option. That is how you should present it on the radio. Instead, you're giving this man, it's like he's picking off of a menu. Crazy. I can't abide by that kind of action. And you can't help but point a finger and say, Brown and Stella, these people, the most vocal about what happened the other day with Max and Lando, even though Lando himself has come out and essentially made a mockery of half of what they said. But the point is, you think they need to focus a little more on what they're doing and stop worrying about what other people are doing. Because I am a McLaren fan. I like McLaren, as I said. McLaren was Senna's team, and that's my guy, And I want to see McLaren succeed. I happen to like Lando. I have a lot of time for him. I think he's a good guy. I think he's fast. I think Piastri is a superb driver, has a lot of development ahead of him, and is going to be possibly, right at the upper level anytime soon. So I have a lot of time for McLaren, and I want McLaren to succeed. And it really, really aggravates me that the last 3 or 4 races, they've literally flushed success down the toilet with stupid calls, right? And you can't help but think that a lot of the times, because Norris is maybe starting to doubt what the pit is telling him or the guidance that he's going to get from the pit, it is forcing him now to make some snap decisions that often turn out to be wrong. And yeah, he's hard on himself and he blames himself after. But really and truly, how much of that is being driven by the bad decisions that the pit is making? You can't help but think that, right? So I'm kind of really ranting here, but McLaren, the leadership of McLaren, Stella and Brown, are pissing me off. They need to get their shit together, focus on getting the decisions right, getting the strategy right, and stop worrying about what everybody else is doing. Focus on themselves, getting their strategy right, and making sure their drivers are getting the best opportunity to maximize this great car that they have. right? Rant over with McLaren, but I really feel strongly about it, as I said, because a team I like. Red Bull and Verstappen. Inextricably linked. And it's sad that when you hear me mentioning driver pairing earlier, we're talking about McLaren and Mercedes, but can't mention Red Bull. Because the truth is, Red Bull right now, they don't have a driver pairing. They have a driver and they have a joker. Right? I tell you. I think Verstappen, first of all, I think the Red Bull is still fast, but again, it's not as fast as the McLaren. I think the McLaren has the measure of the Red Bull at the moment. And the problem is that if you have to always be relying on Verstappen to make up the gap, on the few occasions that he does make an error, it's going to cost you. He screwed up in practice, in qualifying, and that fourth place hurt him, or fifth place, it hurt him. No, fourth. I don't know. I'm confused. The hurricane. I'll blame it on the hurricane. Not on the road. It was the hurricane's fault. Fourth place was not terrible, but ultimately, even though he made a really good pass on Lando, the truth is he had to use up a lot of tires in that first stint, and I think that hurt him. I also think that ultimately the mediums didn't suit the Red Bull. It wasn't really clicking. I think the McLarens had his measure there. And certainly by the time they got on the Inters, I think that very stiff suspension that we've spoken about on Red Bull in the past, the same thing that really hurt them in Monaco and to a lesser extent on the curbs like in Canada and so on. I think that super stiff suspension is not well suited to rain. In rain, you have to soften up the suspension quite a bit. And I think McLaren got that compromise much better. And so they were much faster in the rain on the Inters. Verstappen was essentially nowhere. So he had all his work cut out for him in that last stint on the hards. Now, that's where we get into the magic. First of all, let's give some credit to Red Bull. Based on the hand that they were dealt with the bad qualifying, I think that the team, that you have to give credit where credit is due. These guys responded very well. The pit calls were spot on. They brought him in at the right time every time. The right selection of tires. Their strategist, that lady Hannah Schmidt, I'm telling you right now, whatever she's being paid, it's not enough. She deserves some serious bonus. In fact, I hope Verstappen personally gives her some kind of reward after these races. Because let me tell you, that hard tire call was genius, right? Now, obviously, for them to make those types of calls, they have to have a lot of faith that their driver can, carry it through. And obviously, this is how that team works. They have a great driver. They have a good car, or a great car actually, and they have great strategists. And when you combine them and how they function, they produce great results. Because the truth of the matter is, Verstappen really, Red Bull I should say as a team, and Verstappen and that car, didn't ultimately deserve that second place. They kind of, Verstappen I think, drove and got it. He drove that car and worked the strategy hard and got that second place from Norris, right? Coupled with the fact that McLaren screwed Norris. So that was a well-driven second place. And in fact, a few more laps and he probably would have caught Hamilton, but that's a woulda, coulda, shoulda. So forget about the more laps. But the fact is he had the pace. Even in the cool-down room after, you could hear Hamilton saying, damn, you're fast, you're really catching me. So there's no question that Verstappen had the pace at the end. But just couldn't reach back to first place, but had enough pace to take the second. More full credit to him and full credit to the team for recovering from a bad situation and essentially really presenting a contrast to McLaren, where the team with not the best car put the best strategy in and makes progress. The team with the best car screws up the strategy and reverses, right? That's a perfect contrast in terms of good quality teamwork versus, Stella and Brown. Okay. I want to touch a little on Haas. Why? I'm not gonna go through everything. I mean, because the video kind of getting long, but Haas really is doing well. Again, we go back to trajectories. Haas has been on a good trajectory. They have been making progress, no question about it. I mean, superb driving. I think they're a little unlucky, with Magnussen, but the truth is, superb driving. Hulkenberg lost some place at the start. I think there was just a whole heap of confusion and chaos, as tends to be in the mid-pack. But Hulkenberg drove well, qualified well, drove well, showed that the car had pace. Magnussen as well. So the Haas definitely is on a trajectory upward. How it will perform on tighter, more twisting tracks or rougher street type surfaces, later in the season, remains to be seen. But it definitely is working well on the higher speed tracks and where it wasn't before. And now they're a decent contender in the midfield. Aston Martin also didn't do bad, both cars in the points. Stroll again finishing ahead of Alonso. What does that mean? I don't know. Is Alonso losing it? Or is it just a kind of anomaly? Hard to say. I don't know. Is he losing skill, or is he losing motivation, or is he losing both? Hard to say. Not sure. Albon didn't do too badly either. Sargent actually didn't do badly. Surprise, surprise. I mean, even a broken clock is right twice a day, right? Sargent didn't do too badly, but eventually, didn't work out fine. But overall, I'd say pretty decent race. I can't, not the greatest, not most exciting, but decent. And the end had me on the edge of my seat. I mean, the end had me kind of shouting and screaming. Decent, clean passes. I think, Verstappen was passed a few times, didn't make it an issue. He passed back a few times, no issue. Granted, these are more relatively straightforward passes this time. No wicked, late breaking into corners and stuff, or on the outside type of pass. They were more straightforward, but still good passing. Other than the first one on the first lap was a pretty good pass. I mean, give credit where credit is due. I mean, this is Verstappen after all, right? So that pass on the outside on Harris was pretty wild on cold tires. But overall, decent race. Again, congratulations to Hamilton. Must be encouraged by Mercedes. Must also be worried by Ferrari. We'll see. Russell, salt again. Good race. Looking forward to the rest of the season.